Sultan Abdul Hamid II, an era that shaped the fate of an empire. In 1876, the Ottoman Empire was facing a severe political and economic crisis. The empire's position in Europe and the Balkans was becoming increasingly weak, while pressure from foreign powers continued to grow. It was during this difficult period that Abdul Hamid II ascended to the Ottoman throne. He did not inherit an easy kingdom. Although the empire still controlled vast territories, its internal and external problems were enormous. To preserve the state, Abdul Hamid relied on diplomacy, centralization, and a cautious political strategy. In 1876, a constitution was proclaimed in the Ottoman Empire, and parliament began its activities. This was an important turning point in Ottoman history. But soon afterward, war began. From 1877 to 1878, the Ottoman Empire fought a major war against Russia. The conflict was extremely difficult for the empire. Although Ottoman forces resisted fiercely in several battles, the overall outcome of the war brought serious losses to the empire. Inside the palace, Sultan Abdul Hamid II carefully followed every report coming from the front. Every military report, every map, and every diplomatic message could influence the future of the empire. In 1878, the Congress of Berlin was held.
Sultan Abdul Hamid II, the final struggle of the Ottoman Empire. In the final decades of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire stood at a crossroads. For centuries, the empire had been one of the greatest powers in the world. Its territories stretched across Europe, Asia, and Africa, connecting different civilizations, religions, and cultures. But by the late 19th century, the balance of power had changed. European powers were becoming stronger, while the Ottoman Empire was facing economic difficulties, political instability, nationalist movements, and increasing pressure from abroad. It was into this difficult world that Sultan Abdul Hamid II came to power. In 1876, Abdul Hamid II ascended to the Ottoman throne. He inherited an empire under enormous pressure. The government was struggling with financial problems. Political groups were demanding reforms. In the Balkans, nationalist movements were growing stronger. And European governments were closely watching every weakness of the Ottoman state. Abdul Hamid understood that the empire could not survive without major changes. At the beginning of his reign, the Ottoman constitution was proclaimed. The first Ottoman parliament was established, creating a new political system in which representatives could participate in government. For a short time, hopes for constitutional government grew. But the situation quickly became more dangerous. In 1877, war broke out between the Ottoman Empire and Russia. The conflict would become one of the most difficult moments of Abdul Hamid's early reign. Ottoman soldiers fought on several fronts, defending the empire's territories. The fighting was brutal and exhausting. Although Ottoman forces achieved important successes in certain battles, the overall military situation became increasingly difficult. Inside Yildiz Palace, Sultan Abdul Hamid.
By the beginning of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire had entered a completely new era. The empire was still vast, but its position in the world was becoming increasingly difficult. European powers were competing for influence in Ottoman territories, while nationalist movements were growing stronger in many regions. Sultan Abdul Hamid II understood the danger. He believed that the survival of the empire depended on maintaining political stability and keeping the remaining territories united. For this reason, he strengthened the central government and expanded the state's communication networks. The telegraph became one of the most important tools of his administration. Messages could now travel between distant provinces and Istanbul much faster than before. This allowed the government to respond more quickly to events across the empire. But modernization was not limited to communication. New schools were established, military education was improved, and technical knowledge became increasingly important. A new generation of Ottoman students began learning subjects that had previously been limited to a small part of society. The empire was changing. But while the government was modernizing its institutions, political opposition was also becoming stronger. Young intellectuals believed that the empire needed deeper political reforms. They wanted a stronger constitutional system and greater political participation. These ideas spread among students, officers, journalists, and educators.
In 1909, political tension in Istanbul reached a dangerous level. Different groups within the army and society were divided over the future of the empire. Some supported the new constitutional system. Others wanted a return to the old order. The streets of Istanbul became increasingly tense. Soldiers appeared throughout the city. Political leaders held urgent meetings. Inside Yildiz Palace, Sultan Abdul Hamid II received reports about the growing crisis. He knew that the situation could quickly become uncontrollable. The political struggle was no longer simply a debate about reforms. It had become a struggle for power. In April 1909, the crisis reached its decisive stage. Military forces opposed to the Sultan's position moved toward Istanbul. The political leaders of the constitutional movement gained greater control. Abdul Hamid II was now isolated. The palace that had once represented the center of Ottoman authority could no longer protect his position. The decision was eventually made to remove him from the throne. For more than 3 decades, Abdul Hamid II had ruled the Ottoman Empire. He had witnessed wars, diplomatic crises, modernization, political opposition, and the gradual transformation of Ottoman society.
After leaving the throne, Abdul Hamid II entered a very different life. The palace politics were behind him. The decisions that had once affected millions of people were no longer in his hands. He spent his later years away from political power. He read books, followed political developments, and continued to think about the empire he had ruled for so